I had an idea about speaking about causation. And in speaking this, I have a strong awareness that some of us have had vivid personal realization about karma, having this awareness that everything that happened to me was my choice arising from a previous karma. And finding, well, there's a tremendous wisdom and freedom in that. There's another aspect of causation, which is more like perhaps in the Theravada, it could be called a minor theme. And that is this idea of interdependence. We gave the gratitude to parents. So we realized that at the physical level, our life is the result of what our parents did for us in bringing us to birth and caring for us when we couldn't care for ourselves. If we look around and think about it, and think about the endless number of rebirths of all the beings in the world, we may look at any creature, whether it's another person or an animal or a small insect, and have the thought that that being might have been my mother or my father in a past life. And so we can have this tenderness of kindness and the strong natural motivation of harmlessness, not to do any harm to those beings, because of through the endless stream of karma, causation, and rebirth over the countless number of aeons. There's this interrelationship, interdependency among so many, all the different beings or the forces of life. There's even another way of looking at it, and that is that actually this process of causation is not permanent. So when we stop clinging to the doctrine of self, or we have no more ego type attachment to the apparent self that we see in these five aggregates, then the process of causation can appear as an impersonal process. Today's Tuesday. On Sunday, we studied the simile of the snake, which had the profound teachings of the Buddha about the self. And the Buddha was so strongly encouraging the monks to examine whether they could find the self in this body, the feelings, the perceptions, the volitional formations, or the consciousness, or any of the objects of consciousness, any of the things, or experiences we may have in this world. And then even in the idea of rebirth, or the idea of going on from life to life, seeing that actually you can't even find a self in that. And the Buddha distinguished his teachings from many other schools of religious thought, spiritual traditions at the time. The other traditions were looking for eternal life where the self would go on in heaven forever. And the Buddha taught, I just teach the suffering, the arising of suffering, and the cessation of suffering. This is my entire teaching. One of the ways to understand the causation of karma, is that doing a good deed or doing something with a good intention has a good result. There's an idea that independent origination, they sometimes point out that starting at Vedana, so there's the previous causations in the previous life, and then when it comes to Vedana and what we're experiencing in this life, perceptions and feelings, those are the fruition, those are the result of the previous karmas. And then whatever karma we do in this life then has the subsequent cycle of causation and result. There's a way of looking at this as a type of ethic, which is, it's called a character ethic, which is that by developing virtues, you become a good person. And then when you become a good person, you become a happy person, okay, so forth like that. But that's not actually, I found a better description of the fundamental principle of Buddhist ethics about what's a skillful, virtuous behavior and what's the unskillful behavior. And that is about what's called the taints or the asavas, the taint of sensuality, the taint of longing for rebirth, the taint of, oh gosh, no, how can I do this? How can I forget? I've been studying this all for the past several weeks. What's the third taint? Kama niyama, puta niyama.
Taint of ignorance.
The taint of ignorance, thank you.
Yeah.
Avidya niyama. Avidya sava. The reason I'm saying niyama is because I also have niyamas in my mind. So virtuous behavior leads to the calming, diminishing, and eventually to the destruction of the taints. Unskillful, evil, unwholesome behavior leads to perpetuating, causing the increase, causing the arousing, strengthening, and being caught and trapped in those taints, which then keeps us in the cycle of rebirth and also in the cycle of suffering. I happened to notice, I lost the citation for it. I noticed a very nice sutta where Sariputta is speaking, and he speaks about virtue as being related to the destruction of the taints as a very impersonal process. So he's not really saying, I'm destroying my taints. Say, because the personal aspect has disappeared. And he's not really talking about, I'm helping. It's not about self and others. It's just a process of nature. There's an idea in Buddhism which actually I don't love very much, and that is the idea that humans need to have this awareness of the karmic consequences of their good and evil deeds, or else they won't be motivated to be good. So if a person wants to be reborn in heaven, or if a person is afraid of being reborn in hell, then they would be strongly motivated to engage in harmless behavior. And they would try to avoid anything that was unskillful. And it certainly is true, especially in the case of a person who misunderstands the Dhamma and misrepresents the Dhamma that's taught by the Buddha. When the bhikkhus or the students, very, very often, they didn't quite catch a hold of it. They didn't understand it properly. And if you look at the history of Buddhism down the ages, you can see that immediately when the Buddha passed away, people began to misunderstand the Dhamma and to pass on incorrect, misunderstood versions of the Buddha's teachings. And he spoke very strongly about that this is for your unhappiness that has bad consequences for you in this life and the next life. And he also spoke strongly about undertaking any kind of a religious idea, our beliefs, our deepest beliefs, and making them into dogmas that we use to be a cause of conflict, a cause of quarreling. He spoke so strongly about that, but he spoke, in terms of you should be afraid. You should be deeply, profoundly afraid of what the result is going to be if you make this mistake. And so this is true. I acknowledge that. I also think that I acknowledge something in terms of some. This will be this is my own idea. This is not what I have particularly seen in the suttas, but I think it's not necessarily opposite to the suttas. And that is, there's a web of causation that includes the interdependence or the interactions between individuals. When the Buddha taught the Dhamma, he did that for the welfare and benefit of gods and humans. When some monk misunderstood the Dhamma and misrepresented it, that was for the harm and hurting of gods and humans. I am aware that the circumstance into which I was born when I took my birth, that it was my karma that took me to this particular birth at this particular moment and situation. And I'm also aware that in terms of there's a different causation of genetics. So the characteristics that I have as a human being, the tendencies I have, a lot of the tendencies towards craving hatred and ignorance that I have is actually part of the package of the genetic inheritance that I have, and also the capacity I have for wisdom, the capacity for reflection, for clear thinking, for altruism. All of those potentials are also part of this inheritance. And I can, in a sort of way, like see within myself preceding human beings going back through many tens of thousands of years who were evolving and developing. And then even before the human evolution, there were other living beings, going all the way back through the billions of years, all the way back to when the first form of life, came to be in the planet. And so in that way, I kind of like I have a genetic connection, okay, to all the life in the world. And then a second part of the causation that I think I can acknowledge is the material circumstance into which I was born. So being born into a country where there's enough food, where was enough shelter for me, where there's material infrastructure, where there's all the inventions that happened, and even the circumstance of nature, the particular frightening circumstance that we have with climate change and what we have done to the world. All of that, like that material inheritance, okay? So that's like the gift. It's part of the gift that I inherited when I happened to take the birth into this time and place. And then last of all is a cultural inheritance, like the way of thinking. So I came into the world that has a certain culture, certain ways of thinking, certain language, certain ideas of logic, certain values, certain, all kinds of cultural aspects, and I guess also including some of the inventions and the ability to, now when we study the Dhamma, instead of trying to read great thick books and to, mark them and put little notes and post-its in it, and then trying to keep diaries or something of the things that seem to be important, so that we hope that later on we'll be able to find them. Nowadays we can just use the Google and find the the things that we learned before. So there's all of this web of causation, including karma, but also including other kinds of causation. And by appreciating all of those other things, this gives me a sense of, well, gratitude for whatever is useful that I've inherited from other beings that came before me, a sense of compassion and forgiveness for whatever was negative or difficult in that inheritance, a sense of like a understanding about it, and also a powerful sense of moral motivation, knowing that whatever I do or what I fail to do is like the wings of the butterfly putting its own causation into the material world, into the cultural world, and even, I guess, into the genetic world, because I forgot to have children. So, that's a choice. So every choice has a consequence. So beings throughout this whole stream of time are making actually billions of choices all the time. And those choices have results. The teaching about rebirth is something that the sutras are actually quite, it's really interesting. Rebirth in the wheel of samsara is so essential and fundamental to the whole concept of the Dhamma that the Buddha taught. So the dukkha that a person can experience because of praise and blame, pain and hurt, fame and ignominy, pleasure, richness, all those materialistic or social kinds of sufferings that a person can have in their lifetime is absolutely trivial compared with the fundamental dukkha of the cycle of rebirth, and going around and around in rebirth, and having this this inevitability of being reborn according to our karma. One of the suttas that we recite very often is the 10 reflections, the Dasadhamma Sutta. And one of the 10 reflections is, I am the owner of my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do for good or for ill, for that I shall be the heir. And it's a very, one could start to think and say, wait a minute, we're supposed to be letting go of everything. So why does the sutta say, I am the owner of my karma? That's a good question. And my idea about that is that if you look at the Pali and look at the language that's being used, it's all like terms that are related to family and householder life. So being an owner, when you're a householder, you own your property, whatever it is. You own your cows and your barn and your rice and your servants and all those things, and that's like part of the basis of your happiness. And then to be born, then it talks to be one is the idea of the yoni. It's the relationship, but it's a reference as the womb. So a womb is both the mother's womb, and it's also like if you were making a kind of a sculpture or some kind of art object where you had a form and you pour the metal into the form and then take it out, and it has the image that you carved into the form. So that matrix that you use to make the object is also called a yoni. So anyways, it's related to mother, and then being related, that's related to your relatives. Being supported by the karma, that's related to actually the people who have the obligation to take care of you, which will be your mother, your father, your husband, your people who are in your life. And then when you say whatever karma I do, of that I shall be the heir. Okay, so like in the family, in our family life, we may expect to inherit the livelihood, whatever the family business is, we inherit it. And so what the Buddha is saying in this particular reflection is actually your mother, your father, your house, your farm, your business, your inheritance is not really what you own. You really own your karma. So it's the karma is the fundamental thing. All of those other things are not fundamental. And that's kind of like my reading of that particular reflection. There's a way, another way in which the teachings in the Pali Canon are very careful and precise about rebirth. And that is that when the Buddha spoke about the knowledges that he gained at his awakening, he had the knowledge of his own previous lifetimes. And he had the knowledge of beings, the way that they are reborn according to their actions. It was quite clear that a lot of the students of the Buddha and a lot of people listening to the Buddha do not have that direct knowledge. Even one can be having stages of awakening, one can be a fully enlightened arhat without necessarily developing that direct knowledge of the previous lifetimes and of the rebirth of beings. And it was because of that that the Buddha gave a particular teaching, say, well, if you are not sure about rebirth from your own direct experience, you may figure that if there's no rebirth and I behave in a virtuous way, then I will enjoy the results of that virtuous life, and I won't be any the worse for it. And if there is rebirth and I behave in a virtuous way, then I'll be happy in this lifetime and I'll be happy afterwards. I'm quite sure that any small residue of clinging, or the tendency of clinging to the self, becomes that which keeps us on this cycle of rebirth. And when we through the totality of the practice, when we come to get beyond that, so that, as it said in the sutta that we started last Sunday, it said that if somebody takes away the grass, the twigs and the branches and the leaves, you don't say, oh no, myself is being taken away. Because you know that all those things are not myself. And just the same way, whatever we experience with these five khandhas is these five aggregates that are frequently identified with the self. When we deeply, deeply know none of it is ourself. And then when we can see that parts of our khandhas are continuously disappearing and changing and being taken away, then there's no more anxiety about it. No more anxiety than if we saw somebody took the leaves and the branches away. Those the idea of heaven and wishing to be good because of heaven is something that at some stages, I think especially like Americans, they might think, well, that teaching is just kind of like superficial, and that's not like not the real teaching of the Buddha. But there are several places in the like versions of the gradual training, especially the training that's given to lay people, where the Buddha speaks about developing that initial right view, which is understanding about causation, and acknowledging that there are enlightened beings in the world, and then taking care of one's ethics, one's morality, developing loving kindness, and practicing the Brahma Viharas, the boundless, the divine abidings of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity in all directions without any limitations. And then letting go of the hindrances and practicing meditation. At this point, the Buddha mentions that even before you have gained noble attainments, in that moment, when the hindrances are gone, when your morality is pure, when your heart is boundless in that way, if you should happen to die right then you would be reborn in heaven. Or if you would be alive in that moment, your life is just like a heaven. It's a heavenly existence. That's why it's the divine abidings, because it's heavenly. And then it's from within those states that one is able to obtain concentration, and then emerging from concentration has the potential to fully apprehend the Four Noble Truths, to become disenchanted with suffering, and to realize that really the process leading to awakening. But it's like heaven is a very essential and useful and beneficial part of this samsara that we have. You know, there's angels and gods in heaven, and everything that they see is beautiful. Whatever they taste is delicious. Whatever they touch is very pleasant. Everything they experience is very pleasant because of everything that they think is very pleasant. And that's kind of like the characteristic of being in heaven. And so that was, it's part of the Buddhist cosmology. And okay to come there first, especially if we have that initial right view. And then we want to go beyond. And when it comes to that realization of the Four Noble Truths, that's in that particular sutta, something that comes at the conclusion of that process, and it comes upon either within or emerging from jhana. So at that point, what can be realized is something which is beyond personality. It's an impersonal process, and we can see all of those processes that I was talking about, including the karma process and including everything that's done by beings, is all just a manifestation of a process which is beyond personality. On one occasion, my teacher, Bhante Gunaratana, was invited to be on a panel discussion. This was just after there was a big tsunami in 2011 or something like that, 2010, I'm not sure which year it was, but there was a great, no, it wasn't 2006, 2005. Okay, thank you. So he was asked on this panel of different religious thinkers from different religions, and they were like struggling like with why God did this to Thailand and Sri Lanka. And one of the aspects of the what the questioner was trying to, he was sort of like pushing Bhante Gunaratana, and he was trying to get Bhante to say something about why so many Tamil people who live near the coast were killed by the tsunami, and so many Sinhalese people who are like farmers and live more inland escaped the tsunami. And so he was trying to get Bhante to say something about that it was their karma, and Bhante, he would not take the bait, and instead he was expressing one of the other, they're called niyamas, which is other kinds of causation. So he associated with utu niyama, which is relating to the weather. And he said, the reason why this happened is because you have these tectonic plates underneath the surface of the earth, which are gradually moving and slipping, and they create a certain, tension. They're stuck together, and then as the pressure builds up and builds up and builds up, finally they slip, and that causes a tremendous wave. That's the reason why there was the tsunami. And so this is the reason that I have decided that it's okay for me to kind of like acknowledge this interdependence and be sort of sensitive and aware of what is the impact that I'm having on the cultural, physical, social, and genetic aspect of the world, which is going to go down and be handed down to countless numbers of beings in the future. And for me, that feeling of interdependence is super motivating in terms of trying to be good and trying to not do any harm. I'll tell you what these other kinds of causation are. The utu niyama is about the seasons, the rainy season, the winter, the summer, the wind, the weather, and so forth. That's all part of utu niyama. And then bija niyama is related to seeds, and that means that a seed produces another one of its own kind. So that's your genetics. So humans, like if I have a baby, if I had had a baby, it would have turned out as a human baby, not a cat or something else, right? So that's bija niyama. Then karma niyama is good actions produce good results, right? Or you could say an action with a wholesome intention will not produce a bad result, and an action with an unwholesome intention will not produce a good result. Whether how long it takes and all the intervening factors, it gets really complicated, but if you could just remember that regulation. So if you have a bad intention, it can't have a good result. So pay attention to intentions. Then the chitta niyama is about, chitta is the mind. And it's explained, these are all actually developed in the commentary, not in the suttas. So it's explained as causation, that each mind moment is arising from, through causation from the previous mind moment. So I would say, so it's an aspect of causation related to volition and chitta, the states of mind. Then the Dhamma niyama, there's two different explanations. The one that Mandaji taught me that I like better is, it does appear within the suttas, the Niyamata Mahapadana Sutta, and that is, there are these dhammas, all conditioned things are impermanent, all conditioned things are unsatisfactory, and all dhammas are without self. So that's the Dhamma niyama. Being aware or acknowledging different kinds of causation, I think, can help us from not being like simple-minded in or not getting like superstitious about thinking that everything that happens is because of karma, because not having a superstitious approach to karma. And like, if I fall down and break my leg, it could be a karmic result of something. But it could be like I'm the safety officer at the, I used to be the safety officer out at a hermitage, and people trip and fall over there all the time. And so we try to make the path like safe. We try to like have a handrail, and try to tell people to work safe and follow the safe procedures. And so it could be that, like I broke my leg because I was being careless, or I broke my leg because the stairs were not safe, or something like that. And so if I just think it's my karma, then I'm not like taking care of things. But if I acknowledge different kinds of causation also are part of reality, then I can have a more flexible mind and actually avoid certain kinds of dangers of getting superstitious about karma. It is possible. I mean, I had the karma to be born as a human being, and so as a human being, I have the nature to break my leg, or to be injured, to fall sick. I mean, and that was like on the ticket that I got when I took the human birth, and so I acknowledge that, but it is, I think, very useful that the commentators sort of acknowledged these other aspects of causation. The last thought that I'll give before going to questions or discussion is the idea that in time, the Theravada sort of fell into this theory of moments, and like the moments, the past, present, and future moments were all like following each other like boxcars on a train. And they created a sort of like a philosophical difficulty for themselves about how these cars are connected. If we think in terms of causation, causation is the connection. Look, this moment, this present moment, contains all the previous moments. The entire past is like contained in this present moment in a way like all the conditions of the past could have led up to the particular combination of factors that's making this present moment to be what it is. And this present moment is like the embryo of the future. So whatever causes, like by my choices, this is my sankhara, my volitional choices, is setting in motion the causes which will then flow on into the future. And so in that way, the past, present, and the future, and even the interrelationships among beings have this kind of like this connection, this connectivity. So the Mahayana imagery of the Indra's net, where all the beings are connected like a net. And so if you pluck one, you take one node of the net and you sort of like pluck it, and that vibration, goes everywhere. So I think that is beneficial. It's uplifting and motivating, and not doesn't have to be opposite to what was taught by the Buddha and reflected in our early Buddhist texts. So having said this much, I'm going to invite, if anybody has, I'm sorry that I spoke so long without stopping and pausing for questions, but that was the way it went tonight. I wanted to save the questions for the end. And now I would like to know what you know for yourself about causation and how your own knowledge of causation helps you to keep your spiritual urgency going and to keep going on this path. If anybody has a comment or a question about anything I said, welcome to raise your hand and speak. And as well, if anybody in the room has got a question, you may come ask a question. There's a few people here.
Hi, this is Carl. I think what brought my awareness to causation is like you were mentioning throughout the whole talk. To me, it's about goodness. It's good to be out of wanting to be positive, wanting to be there for people, to make sure I do the right thing and whatever. Is that all parami, by the way? Parami?
The paramis, our perfections, it's a different system, but those were the intentional choices that were made by the Bodhisattva over many lifetimes as he was evolving towards taking birth in his last birth as Gautama, as the one who was to become enlightened in that lifetime. So that's a very motivating system where you're thinking of taking these particular beautiful qualities and really striving to develop them to the utmost. Yeah.
Is that a production, or is it more of what is produced out of trying to do the right thing, kind of by you know, like rightful speech, you know, no killing, no stealing, no, it's 5 precepts, 8 precepts, many more precepts, whatever.
The Buddha definitely recommends to follow the 5 precepts. The Buddha recommends regularly from time to time, like on the full moon day or when taking like a personal retreat, to take on additional precepts, the 8 Uposatha precepts, where in addition to the 5, you would make the decision, the choice to be celibate for that day, to completely avoid, to fast in the afternoon, and to avoid using high and luxurious beds and different kinds of like entertainment and beautification, and to just have to have a simplified sort of like a quasi-monastic type of a life. So those precepts are what causes your sensual desire, your desire for rebirth, which is your desire for existence. It includes wanting to be reborn in heaven, but it also, like the desire to be a certain kind of person, to have a status, to have a position. That's all like the related to that. So sensuality, the desire for existence or for status, for position, for eternal life, and then the delusion. Those 3 things become weaker and weaker the more you practice with those virtues. So I'm telling you this because the Buddhist ethical teaching is systematic and principled, and the underlying principle is to cause those negative qualities, those fetters, to get weaker and weaker. So if you are trying to practice right speech, for example, and the more you practice right speech, the more angry you become. It could happen. That would mean that you've got the wrong end of it. You're not getting a hold of it in just the right way. So you should be aware of keeping your precepts, and also whether your state of mind is becoming more pure.
And does that come to the ending of dependent origination? But those 3 things you spoke about, basically that's when it is that, then you have to worry about rebirth.
That's one of the knowledges of a fully enlightened arahant or a Buddha, is the complete destruction of those 3 things. Before it becomes completely destroyed, it will become weaker and weaker. So the taint of sensuality, the taint of becoming or the desire for eternal life, and the taint of ignorance. Those 3 taints are destroyed when somebody becomes a fully awakened arahant. So don't feel bad if you have them now. Just live in such a way that those things get more and more calmed down, weaker and weaker. And, you know, some of the craving that you had before gets to be gone forever, little by little.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sadhu, sadhu.
I see a hand. Let's see. Richard.
Thank you, Hyatt. I just want to mention about causation. there is a sutta where the Buddha is talking to Ananda, and he says that understanding paticca samuppada, this process of causation, is stream entry. And we can see this reflected in the very first discourse by the Buddha, when Kondona comes to the understanding of the stainless vision of the Dharma arose in his mind. Whatever is subject to origination, all is subject to cessation. And then when Asaji goes and speaks to Sariputta the first time, right? He also experiences the same thing when Asaji says, of those things that arise from a cause, the Tathagata has told the cause, and also what their cessation is. That is the doctrine of the great recluse. And it says that Sariputta, upon hearing those first two lines, attained stream entry or hearing entry. And when he went and repeated that to Mahamoggallana, Mahamoggallana also, just hearing that about cessation, about origination and cessation, also attained stream entry. So this is one of the most important concepts in Buddhism for making that transition from ordinary worldling to a noble disciple. And the other thing I wanted to mention was when you were talking about kama and being one's heir to one's kama. Well, kama means action, and Buddha says it is chaitana, volition, that I call action. So it is, you are an heir to whatever chaitana comes up in your mind that motivates you to do something. The results are vipaka. V means like complete, and pa means going to, and ka means result. So vipaka, going to the complete result. Now, not all actions end though in a vipaka, as you were explaining about. There are 6 different factors, right? And those factors can actually change things up. Like I'm sure there were many nice, good, saintly people living in the place where the tsunami came, and suddenly they were killed, just because of the nature of the world and how nothing is certain here, even though they were nice, good people, doing kind actions and everything else. So a specific vipaka is not certain, but some things do come to vipaka. And the main thing that comes to vipaka in this life is because you took birth, right, which is based on your chaitana, your volition from a previous life, right? You take birth now this life, well, that's a vipaka. And then you go through all the ups and downs of life, old age, disease, and death. Well, those are all vipakas. And death, that's the ultimate vipaka for this life. And then due to your chaitana, you continue on again, if you haven't broken free of the cycle of samsara. So we can see this process mentioned in Majjhima Nikaya 121, section number 11 by Bhikkhu Bodhi sections, where he describes about, he uses a different term, but he's talking about going into the 5th formless experience. And so he says, when you go there, if you realize, he uses these terms, Pali words, hold on. Abhisankato, abhisanchetano, that if you realize that even that state is just your own volition towards a sankara,
Right.
and you see that thoroughly, then you free yourself from the 3 taints, like you were talking about, and attain arahatship. So it all comes down to this idea of sankara, that it's our own chaitana for these ideas that we're kind of developing in our own mind of various things, right? Mental ideas or speech or physical actions, whatever. It's our own mind's volition that's causing this to go on. So if we stop that process, if we stop making those imaginary ideas, right, it's at that point, by that stopping, that we, step out and attain arahatship. Anyways, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Richard, I want to really appreciate the first thing that you said about the association of seeing dependent origination, especially the 12 steps of dependent origination, as being, when you really see it, that's the stream entry. In the other formula about stream entry, there is the ending the fetter of Satkaya Diti, seeing the self in any one of the 5 aggregates. And I think that those two things are exactly happening together. When you don't see the self anymore, you just see dependent origination. You just see the flow of causes and effects. So that's a really, we all should be quite interested in stream entry. If you don't have it, that would be the next thing that you should really want to have. And so in reading sutras or studying the Dhamma, I think it's very worthwhile to reflect about what is stated in the teachings to be the characteristics of stream entry, and then to kind of like direct your awareness or direct your practice towards those things. Let's see if there are other questions and comments. Shari.
I just was trying to kind of follow what you were talking about, because there were a lot of terms that I wasn't familiar with.
Mhm.
And I was sorry I wasn't at the sutta discussion on Sunday. But I was looking at did you say there were 6 factors in cause and effect? And you named them.
This is in the commentary.
How could I find out? I guess my question is, how could I find out more about these 6 factors? Because it strikes me, just in my daily life and my encounters here at the temple, that it would be important for me to know about that, so that I didn't harbor resentment when people come up with certain superstitions, and I had a better understanding. Okay, 5 niyamas. Okay, got it. Okay, I thought you said niyama, and then I thought, am I confusing that with a yoga term? Thank you.
It has a different meaning in yoga. It's the same word, but it has a different meaning in yoga.
Okay. I'll thank you. I'll see if I can find more information on it for my own education. Thank you. Unless you have a suggestion as to where I could go.
I just Googled it, and I can email you the link. You can Google it yourself.
Okay.
I found a nice description in the Dharmapedia, which explained both from the yoga perspective and from the Buddhist perspective.
Okay. Thank you, Aya.
Yeah. Because that's commentarial, it doesn't get emphasized very much, but it's kind of, the commentators were closer to the Buddha than we are, and they were trying to think very logically and develop a very systematic way of capturing what they remembered from the teachings of the Buddha. If there's no further questions, I will remind you that I am leading a 3-day Zoom retreat from May 12 to 14 about the destruction of the asavas. You can find out about it on our website. And I guess I could say that just now, yesterday, I heard from Shari that the Tuesday group is interested in inviting me to give a day long for the Tuesday group at the Watt sometime in August. So that will be also coming up.